My first time playing Devil May Cry 3, I hadn't expected much from Virgil.
What?
At first, my only experience with him had been from the first game, where he was a mostly silent, corrupted version of himself. He got some good hits in, sure, but compared to what we've seen from Dante, I could hardly say that I found him impressive. Apparently Capcom understood this skepticism, because they did everything possible to take what was little more than a side character and turn him into one of the most badass antagonists in video game history, a suitable title given who he's related to. We have already discussed what makes Dante one of the greatest of all time. A link to that video will be in the description, and while he may be the star of the franchise, he doesn't hold DMC up all on his own. Virgil's popularity cannot be understated. Some polls I've seen even put him ahead of his brother. I personally wouldn't go quite that far, but who gives a damn about favorites when we can have it all? I am very greedy like that. So we'll start with what Devil May Cry 3 did to make Virgil such an icon in a game where he wasn't even the protagonist. Once that's settled, we'll move on to analyzing his character and what makes him unique from that angle. I admit there's a lot to discuss for a man who's only appeared in a few of the main titles. And right out the gate, with DMC3's beginning, the writer set the tone for Virgil by putting him in a library. It certainly contrasts with his brother. Ever notice how the Devil May Cry office hasn't got any books? That is for nerds, and nerds aren't welcomed here. Especially when they greet you like that. Oh, thank God the pizza is safe. But let us note Virgil's contrast to Dante, his utter silence. Callous, straightforward. He rarely bothers with eye contact. At first, you may think he's just trying to look cool and detached. But as you see his progress throughout the game, I realized it's really his focus we're watching. Arkham, Lady, the multitude of demons he fights through, they're nothing but obstacles, stepping stones towards his true goal. This oddly enough makes him similar to Dante, that singular focus and an unwillingness to compromise. For Dante, it's killing demons in the name of vengeance. For Virgil, it's power, strength, and the security it offers. Combine that with Virgil sparing no flamboyancy in his own fight scenes, you'll quickly realize that beyond the superficial level, the Sparta brothers share many qualities. But what really solidified Virgil in the eyes of many people was his next kill. As Dante, we have a grueling fight with the Hell Vanguard, which was mighty frustrating for a DMC boss, let me tell ya. After all that work, the bastard flutters off and encounters Virgil. Who does this? As Dante, we had to struggle getting through this guy. Devil May Cry 3 dialed up the difficulty after DMC2's almost laughable excuse for gameplay. It was a rough trial to overcome, but then Virgil one-shots a guy we were struggling with. This contrast was highly effective at making us understand where their standards were. Despite being twins, Virgil was on an entirely different level. The anticipation this left me with, wondering, what the hell's going to happen when I fight him? It was in the back of my head the entire time I climbed a tower, though it had died off just as we were nearing the zenith. Enough time to almost forget who we were up against. I was stupid enough to feel cocky going into this. But then, I remembered the opening.
But in the end, only one was left standing.
Oh yeah, we already knew how this was going to end. Damn it. To think, Dante, a man we've been conditioned to see as an unstoppable force of nature, getting floored like this. Then his opponent merely slicks back his hair and goes about his business, after stabbing his brother again for good measure. Always double tap, folks. This was a shock to the senses, something the game had prepared us for, but the warning could never compare to the experience. Virgil barely seemed fazed by the battle. Meanwhile, our protag is only saved thanks to the rebellion awakening his devil trigger and a timely intervention by Arkham, though that would be another manipulation on his part. This was a huge factor in why Virgil became so popular, even if his screen time is a mere fraction that of his brothers. Hell, sometimes a limited presence can add to a character's charm. It makes their appearance all the more valuable. What also makes this defeat work is that Virgil's strength isn't some contrived plot point to give our main character a hard time. Unlike the Hell Vanguard, for example. Being not just siblings but twins, we can assume they have similar potential. With that in mind, Virgil rivaling Dante is easy to understand, so witnessing Virgil curb stomp him like this only tells us how much further we must go to bridge that gap. Not just in terms of power, but in our heads too. The motivation that guides them is essential. It would prove the pivotal difference in the trials to follow. Virgil only craving power no matter the consequence, and Dante, who endeavors not just to fight and kill, but to protect people, to preserve the very thing his father risked everything for. Again, we discuss this in detail in Dante's video.
Wait, why am I explaining this to you? Then you've been me explaining this to you already. Yeah, I know. I just didn't want to steal my own thunder.
Virgil's ability to own a room just by being present cannot be overstated. His many contrasts to Dante make him more distinguished. His fights are stylish in their own right. By comparison, he does prefer quick and precise tactics, wasting little time on those he deems undeserving of the effort. There's no shortage of disrespect from these two. But there's also honor and integrity. He doesn't backstab. He doesn't fight you if you're at a disadvantage. Such methods are beneath him. It's the same reason he doesn't use firearms. Normally, his ambitions do cause no shortage of tragedy, but we see Virgil's not overtly cruel just for the sake of it. As we've come to expect from Devil May Cry, there is far more to this character than what meets the eye, and everything we've talked about so far happens in just the first half of Devil May Cry 3. Then, they drive it all home with one hell of a team-up followed by a tough, kick-ass, and emotional final battle. That last appearance of him falling into the demon world has been ingrained in our memories. His choices in this scene after he loses says a lot about who Virgil is as a person, but we'll get there. All this, folks, that is how you establish a character. Every scene, every appearance, every fight accomplishes something. No time is wasted. No obnoxious soliloquies or expositions. Just action and results. Hot damn, it's depressing how rare that is these days.
At what point did you think I knew what that meant?
If I haven't said it before, let me say it here and now. Devil May Cry's writing is wildly underrated. People tend to get wrapped up in the extravagant action scenes and fan service, which is rather the point, I think. If you don't care about characters or plot and just want to murder demons in the most disrespectful ways imaginable, you can do that. Enjoy some dance moves. Have at it. Wonder why we never got to see a lady in this outfit again. Join the club. But if you want to delve deeper, pay attention to the moments in between all the excitement, you will find some remarkable writing, and Virgil is no different. It's easy to see this when we view his backstory alongside his brothers. Despite their appearance and mannerisms, the two share the same past, the same trauma that would shape who they would become. Only, while Eva's death inspired Dante to embrace his humanity, to use his strength to protect people, do good in the world, Virgil's path would diverge significantly. Virgil always had a stronger tie to his demonic heritage. He didn't fear it, unlike his brother. He took great pride in it, in fact. And he endeavored to live up to the legacy of his father, a pure-blood devil who pushed back the hordes of hell and defeated their emperor. That is an incredibly high standard for anybody to aspire towards. At only 8 years old, he probably didn't think too strongly about the ramifications of this legacy. Sparta, despite being seen as a hero and legend in the eyes of humanity, in the eyes of his own kind, he's a traitor, a black sheep in need of culling. I doubt that young Virgil knew the target that was painted on his back from the moment he was born. And then, that fateful night. He was all alone when the demons attacked, out playing by himself, outnumbered, alone, terrified. He no doubt called for his mother, for someone to save him from the monsters. But there was no one. His mother, his human side, was nowhere to be seen. And his home was encased in an inferno. This was when his demon side first awoken, granting the power to kill his enemies, to save himself. However, everything else was lost. His mother dead, his brother presumed gone with her. Virgil was all alone, just like Dante, but remember, Dante had his conscience intact. His twin brother felt abandoned by the same humanity that saved Dante. It likely didn't help that, thanks to this difference in personality, Dante was naturally closer to their mother than Virgil, who connected more to their father. In the aftermath of Sparta's death, Virgil was likely feeling extra vulnerable. Who knows if Eva was able to fill that void? He may well have felt disparaged, even at such a young age. All of this would have hammered in his feelings of abandonment, pushing him further from his human side, any emotion at all, really. Of course, we know Eva didn't abandon him. She exposed herself trying to find him, knowing full well the risks involved. If only he had known this, it might have spared both brothers a great deal of tragedy. The years following this event are shrouded in mystery. Virgil likely moved from place to place. Perhaps he had an array of temporary caretakers, as his brother did, concealing his identity to avoid being hunted, not until he was old enough to face the trials ahead. His near-death experience pushed Virgil to overcompensate for his fears, the fear of being weak, being alone and abandoned. He came to reject these feelings, even if he could never shake the dread completely. If merely moving forward couldn't erase what was behind him, then Virgil simply needed more to change that. His father's power had pushed back the hordes of hell. Virgil's own strength had saved him when nothing else did. With enough power, nothing could ever touch him, nothing could hurt him, make him feel weak and vulnerable ever again. Soon, that was all that mattered to him. Thus, his descent into villainy began. Though I suppose calling Virgil a villain isn't completely accurate. It's not inaccurate either. His endeavors make him indifferent to the harm he causes. Just look at the scene in DMC3 where the timid Negro shoots straight through the middle of the city. This alone probably killed hundreds, if not thousands. The subsequent demon attacks let loose by the tower's awakening only added to that kill count. This doesn't include the fact that by breaking Sparta's seal, he was openly letting the demon realm flood the earth. Devil May Cry 5 would present us with a similar scenario. A demonic structure enveloping a city, thousands, probably more, consumed in its awakening, all defeat a process to produce a god, and all thanks to Virgil's actions. Sure, this part in 5 was Urizen's doing. It was still Virgil separating that half of himself that put it all into motion. And considering he did the same thing back in 3, we can hardly say any of this is out of bounds for Virgil's character. You know, I remember thinking back on my first experience with DMC3. What would Virgil do if he had acquired Sparta's strength? With the demons spilling out, would he slay them all? It's made clear by some of his dialogue that Virgil isn't interested in ruling over demonkind. He suffers from the same obsession as his brother. I've spoken before on how Dante is often loitering around the shop, doing nothing, waiting for a call to hunt some demons. Virgil's own ambitions don't seem so far off. What were Virgil's plans? He shows no love for humanity. I doubt he would be interested in saving or ruling them either. But he doesn't actively slaughter them like he does with demons. He treats most humans as insignificant, squashed when they're in the way and ignored when not. But other examples, despite the tragedies that follow in Virgil's wake, make me question his mindset. The fact he never goes out of his way to harm Lady, even when she's actively trying to kill him. You'd think he'd make quick work of this. And on his way to face Arkham, Virgil ignores her presence completely. Granted, she wasn't his target and kept out of the way. And most importantly, the fact that he had relations with a woman sometime prior to the events of DMC3, even if it didn't last or he wound up rejecting her in his quest to shed his humanity. All this would suggest Virgil isn't as blatantly malevolent as he comes across. Maybe he knew that. Maybe he couldn't help but feel influenced by that spark of empathy he still possessed. That side his mother left him with. Let's recall his final fight in Devil May Cry 3. After getting cut down and losing both the Force Edge and the amulet, look at what Virgil reaches for. Not the sword, not the symbol of his father's strength, his combat prowess, it's the amulet, the gift from his mother. It is also a key to Sparta's power, but between the two, this one has a far deeper emotional connection. His decisions also betray a deeper sentiment towards his brother, because I don't believe Virgil had any desire to kill Dante during their encounters. Cruel as he could be, vicious, double-tapping, at first glance, one might think these two were in it for the kill, but the sheer number of opportunities Virgil had. With Dante beaten after their first bout, going for a headshot would have been easy. Virgil won fairly. If being the stronger was all that mattered, he had nothing else to prove. I suppose had Arkham not intervened here, this may well have gone down differently. Virgil could have killed Dante, understanding the risk and letting him live with his devil powers awakened. Then again, if that was his concern, he probably wouldn't have listened to this ghoul-faced jackass to begin with. I would say that their team up against Arkham was another example of Virgil's more complex personality. If the two were so irreconcilable, Virgil would never have set aside their differences long enough to face Arkham. His pride and desire to be the strongest wouldn't have made this so easy. Yet, they work together almost seamlessly. They throw some sass at one another like old buddies before getting to work. We get references to their childhood when they had a bond. Such a thing couldn't be erased, especially since both their pasts are marked by the same cause. If anything, this only adds to the tragedy. witnessing how these two are nigh unstoppable when they work together. Even their father's accumulative might fell in the end, and this is early in their lives. Imagine this same fight, but in their Sin Devil trigger forms. Oh, the carnage would be spectacular.
You know what? I could blow up the whole goddamn world with this thing.
Steering back to their final fight in Devil May Cry 3, there's a bit more to dissect. This initial scene when they face off against each other, despite being at odds, I didn't sense any real hostility between the two, not like there was during the first fight. Now, to be fair, they're both probably worn out beyond belief. It's been a long night. More than that, it doesn't seem like either of them want to fight each other. With Dante, this is more obvious. Think about Virgil's perspective though. There are no threats being made, nor boasting like we saw earlier in the game. He just wants the final key, nothing more.
No matter how hard you try, you're never gonna be like Father. We're wasting time!
It's mighty fascinating that this is a line that makes Virgil snap and charge at him. You'll never be like Sparta. As in he'll never match his strength perhaps. He's hardly concerned about morals or ethics. Think about it. His father saved the world, upending the threat and creating an era where people were safe. Relatively, humans still kinda suck.
In a way, they're more of a pain in the ass to deal with than real demons.
Sparta is shrouded in mystery more than anything else in the DMC universe, but one thing that's beyond doubt is that the man wasn't wanting for surety. He was beyond fear, beyond self-doubt. The very things Virgil desires. I say this is why he lunges at Dante, those insecurities still eating away at his mind. And the only thing that may end his fear is being kept away from him by his own brother. Of course, in a family like this, there's only one way to settle things. And then, there's the aftermath. Virgil, defeated and bloodied, backs away towards the ledge, the entrance to hell itself. Dante reaches out, but Virgil pushes him back. At first, I thought this was his shame talking, over his failure, and Virgil would rather remain banished than live with the fact he lost. But I thought about it more when making this video, how he instantly warns Dante there's no time. And given their conditions, it's unlikely even Dante could carry him out of there before the rift is sealed. Was Virgil trying to spare Dante the same fate? Was this one last act of brotherly compassion before parting ways? The graphics for DMC 3 aren't the most stellar, but Virgil's face doesn't convey a hint of anger or regret. More of a sad realization that his part in this story didn't go the way he desired. Maybe he was secretly pleased Dante at least tried to save him. Who knows? I may be stretching things a bit, but there's more to this scene than Virgil running away like a sore loser. Actually, if we want to talk about Virgil's compassionate side, his positive attributes, DMC 1 also enforced this with how Virgil, as Nello Angelo, hesitates and runs away upon seeing the perfect amulet. His memories compelling him to flee, even if he's not completely in control. Beaten and corrupted, Virgil's pride never faltered, it seems. And this is the period in Virgil's life I'm the most interested in. His fight with Mundus, where he's defeated, corrupted into his service. The Yamato was shattered. What the hell did the Demon Emperor do to him to make him like this? The only time it's addressed really is through V's familiars in DMC 5.
This is our final fight, and the end of Virgil's nightmares.
And even then, it's not much. I still think this gives us a testament to what his brother experienced all those years. The torture, manipulations, the pure, unending agony. Mundus is especially cruel, even by demon standards. How little of the original Virgil was left by the time Nello Angelo took over. There's a lot of questions about the era between DMC 3 and 1 I would have loved to have seen more about. Though, I suspect Virgil isn't the type to pour his heart out. After the events of Devil May Cry 1 are also interesting. He'd been beaten multiple times, his body corrupted, no doubt his mind was fragile too. And worst of all, he was trapped in the demon realm for years. No way out. How did he survive all this time? Sparta's progenies are exceptional, but this is miraculous. You cannot help but wonder how many fights he had over the years. Between the first and fifth games, I believe there's roughly a 10 to 15 year gap. That is a long time to fend for yourself in hostile territory. But against the odds, he pulled through, however slightly. And thus, we arrive at DMC 5, where Virgil and Nero, father and son, finally unite. And what an emotional meeting it was. I imagine that going a bit better.
You know, you remind someone. Almost like the son that I never wanted.
Oh, that's funny. I was about to say you're like the Peppy I never had.
Or maybe not. Virgil's relationship with Dante is complicated enough. With Nero in the mix, it's a different dynamic entirely. Not least the fact that on their first meeting, Virgil's response was to rip off his son's arm. Dude, I loved the Devil Bringer. It looked so badass. It could absorb demonic power and do crazy moves. It made holding hands in public a bit awkward, but Kyrie isn't the judgy type. What I want to know coming out of this scene is, did Virgil know Nero was his son? His talk with Dante near the game's climax would indicate not. At the same time, the Sparta lineage has a bit of a distinct look. White hair, physics-defying combos, bit of an attitude. Then there's the fact that he possessed a Yamato. Repeatedly, they make clear only members of Sparta's bloodline can wield its power. The fact that Nero had it at all, along with his appearance, should be enough of a selling point. Even in his battered state, I doubt Virgil will be that ignorant. If not his own child, then at least somebody of relation, and still he chose to dismember them. He was obviously desperate, and stubbornness certainly runs in the family, not always in a productive way. Honestly, the fact Virgil was the one to have a kid surprises me, as stoic as he comes across. Then again, he is part demon, and more than any maliciousness, demons are creatures produced and driven by their desires. That Virgil dropped his guard just once, maybe it's not such a stretch, and he would go on to abandon her anyways, probably unaware that she was pregnant. Though I wonder if that would have even stopped him. He'd already chosen his path. Now, we need to diverge a bit, because Devil May Cry 5 did precisely that with Virgil's character. We get two literal halves of the man to explore, Urizen and V, and both characters portray Virgil's personality and hidden truths. Urizen, I think, is a personification of what Virgil wanted to be. I'm not saying he's the same person, mind you, just that he embodies the cold, unfeeling satisfaction of being a demon. Focused only on what he desires. His reactions are indifferent. He barely moves from his makeshift throne. One arm rested against his head. The only time in this initial appearance, flashbacks included, where we see him react is Dante's arrival.
Jackpot. Dante.
Very intriguing how that line still resonates with his demon half. Urizen is also very petty. When Nero cuts his hand during their rematch, Urizen is more than a little peeved. You see this in a lot of anime. The character gets a head in, acts all cocky, only to realize that was a practice round. Yeah, that's typically how those fights end. Now, about Urizen's behavior throughout the bulk of the game. How he spends all his time just sitting there. He's not doing anything. Sure, he has minions to handle the work, but he's not indulging in anything, not enjoying his ascent to godhood or reveling in the ecstasy of his vices. He just sits there, as though his quest for power is all there is. There's no drive, no ambition beyond power for its own sake. He did fuse himself to the Clyphont, leeching its power to overwhelm our party at the start of the game. He may just be unwilling to move until the tree has done its job. Is this a common theme for demons? Yes, they all crave power and domination. But are there no desires to complement that? I ask this because of the question I posed earlier. If Virgil acquired Sparta's strength, what would he do afterwards? What would he create, if anything? Or would he simply stand there, sullenly, overlooking the human ant farm he calls Earth? Urizen doesn't seem all that different. He intends to be the Demon King, but that again is just about power and control, the very things Virgil longs for. Dante is the same in that he obsesses over killing demons as a form of revenge. But there's more to him. He has hobbies. He forms relationships, even if they're on the dysfunctional end of things. And his actions have saved Lord knows how many lives. Most of the main cast wouldn't be where they are were it not for him. These are things Virgil and subsequently his human and demon halves cannot say for themselves. It's a rabbit hole of a concept, but one I wanted to ponder a bit. V represents the other side of this dynamic, and his personality is far better fleshed out. He is Virgil's humanity, and like Urizen, you can see elements of his personality weaved into the character. Quiet, but not above being a smartass. He's less impulsive, though that may be due in part to not having the physical abilities he once did. And he's a colossal book nerd.
I'm not a nerd. My mom says there's nothing shameful about being smart.
Being his humanity, that part of himself Virgil had long wanted to remove. It must have been disturbing to be forced into a situation where all those emotions and buried sentiments were forced to the surface. No demonic heritage to dilute it. V confesses this situation pushed him to confront his traumas, his mistakes, something his completed self never had the courage to do. I am particularly entranced by this scene. Not only do we get some much desired introspection from Virgil, or a part of Virgil's point of view, but he's sharing this moment with Trish. Not Dante, not Nero, but the woman modeled perfectly in his mother's image. If that isn't the most direct form of therapy this man could get, I don't know what is. I have always wondered what it would be like if Virgil and Trish met. Probably awkward. More therapy would be required. Though Trish does shut down that connection awfully fast.
I'm not your mommy, V. You're a big boy. And you need to see this through.
It is a good piece of advice. Both brothers have struggled with growing up. Let's not kid ourselves. More than regret, V expresses a lingering envy, for lack of a better term, over his and Dante's situation. Remember that Dante had a much closer relationship with their mother than Virgil did, and how she saved him that night the demons attacked. Feeling abandoned was bad enough. It scarred him psychologically, and that pain has been transmitted towards his brother, a resentment at how fortunate he was to have somebody there, and how that made a world of difference. When Virgil is remade, he follows up on this thinking.
That day, if our positions were switched, would our fates be different? Would I have your life, and you mine?
It's a fair question. If Dante had been alone, would he have walked Virgil's path? Seeing how afraid he's always been of his devil side, it's debatable what might have happened. It's hardly out of the realm of possibility. More interesting from Virgil's perspective, would he even be asking this if it weren't for V? If he hadn't been forced to view himself through the lens of a human, and then reintegrate those memories and emotions into himself? I don't think he would. It's not that this was never a problem before, it very clearly was. But like so much else regarding Virgil's psyche, it was likely buried too deep for him to even acknowledge. I also cannot help but wonder, witnessing V and Urizen re-merge into Virgil, was this always the plan? That Urizen fed off the Clyphont to reach a new level, and then V fuses with him, not only empowering Virgil in the way he had always wanted, but also reincorporating everything V had experienced as well. Was this V's conscious acting through Virgil? Is it independent of what Virgil had wanted when he first split himself? There is a lot to ponder about what all their ambitions were, how much of himself still exists between these two, and how much those lingering elements impacted their action. Considering how long Virgil fought for more power, and how V speaks with regret to all he had cast away, and the very fact he approached Dante to correct this mess. That certainly would never have been Virgil's will. I'm convinced that this was V's plan. Him specifically, not only to stop his devil half from becoming a Resident Evil superboss, Urizen would hardly stand out there, wouldn't he? But also, V never intended to let them kill Urizen. He wanted to return to who he once was, as Virgil. Out of fear of death, perhaps? No doubt that was part of it. V likely inherited those same insecurities Virgil suffered from. The fear of death and powerlessness would be strong motivators. At the same time, learning everything he did, experiencing what it was to be human for the first time in as long as he could remember, I think V wanted Virgil to feel what he had felt, experience what he did. It wasn't just about saving his own life, but saving himself as a person. The first and perhaps most critical step towards redeeming Virgil. You'll notice he's a different person after this. Still stern and silent as the grave, but the coldness he exhibited in DMC3, his actions pushing towards cruelty, we don't see the same brashness. There is this initial skirmish with Dante, which, to be fair, Dante did start it. Not without good reason, mind you. Every time Virgil shows up, hell always seems to follow. And that is not a metaphor. Virgil clearly has the edge here. Dante's been through a lot. Seeing him weak like this, Virgil willingly backs off. He's always had a code of conduct in battle, especially in regard to his brother. More than that though, I want to focus on his farewell to Nero here.
Thank you, Nero.
You know, hearing Virgil say thank you is a rare enough phenomenon. We've also never heard him speak in such a soft, tender way. You'd almost forget this is the same man who tore off Nero's arm not long ago. Nero sure as hell didn't. I do believe that this is V speaking, that lingering part of him at least. Were it not for Nero carrying him the final stretch, this would never have been possible, and everything that follows thereafter. This final chapter of Virgil's story is where we get to see his development put to the test. His body's been restored, he possesses world-consuming power, and a fragment of that lost humanity has been recovered. But what will he do with it? Like I've asked a few times, what would Virgil do once he has everything he wants? He's so close now. The only obstacle, of course, is Dante, or so he thinks. Nero is the last piece of Virgil's story, and it won't go down without a fight, which is about what you'd expect from this family. First of all, this reunion atop the Clifot, did anybody else get DMC3 deja vu? Cause I sure as hell did. It's in the middle of their clash that the conversation switches to the demonic elephant in the room.
Nero is my son.
Yeah, dumbass. You can't remember through that thick skull of yours?
Well, well. That was a long time ago.
I love how this is basically him saying, well, there was this one time. Side note, but I also love how even Dante finds it funny that Virgil has an illegitimate child.
I guess you were young once too. As much as I'd love to hear that story, I think it's about time we
ended this.
This is about as close to having a let's get a drink and talk moment these two ever get. It's a single line of dialogue, but says quite a bit about Dante's personal feelings.
I'm putting a stop to this sibling rivalry.
Virgil certainly seems amused by the sentiment. What is he thinking right now? Face to face with the son he never knew, whose arm he tore off, and has now regrown. Pops is proud of you. In more ways than one, perhaps. The way Nero slapped down Dante, standing his guard, that is definitely something Virgil's progeny would do. Though I believe Dante was willfully stepping back to let these two get acquainted. That's the kind of guy he is. And just like I always wondered if Virgil was genuinely trying to kill Dante all those times, I wondered the same thing during his and Nero's battle. Sure, he makes it clear this fight is to be taken seriously, and Nero does knock him back, but let's be real. Even with his own devil trigger, can it really compare to Virgil? I don't want to delve into it here. We could rant for days about power scaling, especially in a series like Devil May Cry that is a bit loose with how things work. I'll certainly discuss the subject when I make a video on Nero. I only bring it up because if we can all agree Virgil is objectively more powerful, then there's no way he would lose like this. Unless he was holding back, even if it's subconsciously, out of fear, out of sentiment for bringing harm to his own child. Even at the expense of his pride. It marks an incredible milestone for his character to have this restraint, this concern. And it's not the only thing Virgil does that betrays his sentiment. I am trying my damnedest not to make a Team 4-star Vegeta reference here. I swear I'm trying, folks. It's not easy. Okay, maybe one.
Notice me! No!
All things considered, I'm convinced Virgil was holding himself back.
Interesting.
And that's as close as Virgil gets to giving a compliment. Revel in the moment, kiddo. Even your uncle never got one of those. As for the ending, Virgil drops his rivalry with Dante awfully fast, as the Clifot's presence grows more unstable. The only option is to sever the tree within the demon realm, fully aware that they'll be trapped on the other side. This isn't the first time he and his brother have teamed up, but watch what he and Dante do when Nero tries to follow. I spoke in our Dante video about how he's always looking out for Nero, even if he comes across as crude sometimes. Now we see Virgil doing the same thing. Getting stranded in hell is nothing to revel in. Remembering what happened the last time he plunged into the underworld. Thankfully, this time Virgil has backup.
I won't lose next time. Hold on to that until then.
Alright, now this is a small gesture that, like almost everything else about Virgil, conveys a great deal without saying much at all. Something not mentioned in the games is that this book of poetry harkens back to Virgil's childhood. He always had a fascination with reading. The owner of a local bookshop he frequented gifted it to him. Now that's something I would have liked to have known about during my first playthrough. It gives so much more meaning to this action, the only things Virgil had left from his childhood, for when his innocence and humanity were still intact, were his half of the perfect amulet, left to him by his mother, which is now gone forever. Then there's the Yamato, left to him by his father, and now this book, something he acquired for himself. The fact he managed to keep it safe all these years tells you how much value Virgil places in it, and that he chose to leave it to his son. Without this context, you can still recognize this was him telling Nero that he will return. With this information, you know that promise holds far greater value. This scene was actually very emotional looking back on it. Nero's expression at watching his father, a man he just met today, run off again. And his uncle too. A family he never knew he had, not knowing when they'll meet again. Just a vague promise that they will. We'll ignore the fact that Yamato can grant access between the human and demon worlds. Interdimensional travel is a hassle. Let's assume they wanted to give each other some breathing room. When you consider everything that goes down between these two, you can imagine this isn't easy for Virgil either. He just barely reconnected to his humanity. Now he has a child he never knew, never got to experience life with. Growing up without his own father, without anybody there to make him feel safe, Virgil may well feel ashamed of the hardships Nero had to face on his own, just like he did. As much as a man has fought to never feel that way again, he sees that his own child had faced similar trials. Not exactly the same. Nero had Kyrie and Credo. That made a difference. But it couldn't have been easy. The cycle of victimhood is too easily passed on down to generations. Fortunately for Virgil, he no longer must face these difficulties alone. He and his brother finally have the chance to reconnect, and what better way to rebuild their relationship than inordinate amounts of violence? Aw, look at that. Is that a smile? Yeah, that's a smile. Don't lie, buddy, you're having a good old time. This truly was the best ending the Sparta brothers could have asked for. Also a surplus of demon fodder to mow through. Unlike their past engagements, this competition is far friendlier, with moments of rest and a tally so we know who the better half-devil is.
Score for Dante. I'm up one.
Where did you learn to count? We're even.
Yeah, that about tracks. So, Virgil is redeemed. We can finally put this multi-decade tragedy to an end.
Wrong!
Yeah, not quite. DMC5 was a fantastic starting point, but Virgil has a hellload of work to do before being worthy of redemption. Let's not forget just how many lives have been destroyed thanks to him. The Timid Negro in DMC3 was disastrous enough. The Clyphot wiped out an entire city and cannibalized the civilians. With Dante and him steadily making amends, and Nero to help tether Virgil back to his morality, he is well along the path. Which is why we need a Devil May Cry 6 to see the completion of his story arc. Only then will the Devil May Cry series be properly finished. Capcom? 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 Do you hear me? You're not done yet. There's a cash cow here just waiting for you to get to work. Seriously, how many more Resident Evil titles can you guys remake anyways? There can't be that many left to... Oh, sweet mother of holy hell. It'll never end. Virgil has one of the most profound transformative arcs I've ever seen. He was a tragedy in the first game, another symptom of Mundus' endless cruelty. With Devil May Cry 3, we saw him become the villain himself, someone broken by the world and driven to find a way to mend it by any means necessary, even though inklings of his humanity remained, despite his best efforts. Then in the finale, we see him truly at his most desperate. Virgil surrendered everything that he was to see his goals fulfilled, only to realize that what he had sacrificed bore a heavy cost. But it wasn't too late despite all the pain he caused. There was potential for something different, and that revelation leaves us with a bit of hope at what's in store for his future. And we witnessed all this through beautifully choreographed fights, slick and stylish just as we've come to expect from this series, and phenomenal music to complement it. What more could we ask for, besides Devil May Cry 6? Like, comment, and subscribe. Always feel free to share your own thoughts. A video on Lady is up next. I'll see you all again real soon. Till then.